Guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about what you should know about remote medical coding. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, so a lot of people get sold into medical coding with the idea that, oh yes, you can be able to work at home and you'll be able to spend time with your family. And the thing about it is, it's a little bit more to it than that. With remote medical coding, and the reason that a lot of companies, not every, a lot of companies don't want to hire brand new people to work remotely is because there's going to be a lot of questions that you have in the beginning. Now, book coding and real world coding are two different things, meaning that books, when you're in school, they're written by people, doctors and scholars and everybody else. So it has everything that you need in there, right? Everything that you need in the note, everything that you need in the question in order to be able to solve it, right? But when you get in the real world, the electronic medical records are going to be different. Every facility has a different one, or even if they do have the same brand, they may have a different level of the package for the electronic medical record. So every place is going to be different. Every doctor is going to be different. Every specialty is going to be different. So with this, you are going to get some variety in what you see in the documentation. You will have some providers who will document better than others. Now, there's a problem with this. Some doctors will document well and some will not. What happens is now you are separated by space, right? You are in your home and the doctor's at the facility. If you need to query, if it is your responsibility to query, because sometimes it's not, sometimes it'll go to somebody else who's either in the facility or it'll go to a senior coder or maybe a CDI person and clinical documentation integrity person. It'll go to that person and then you don't have to worry about it. But in the instance that you do have to worry about it as the coder, now you have to send an email to somebody that you have never met, who does not know you, and all of a sudden you're asking them to clarify something or you're questioning them about something that they documented. So for some providers, they understand this is part of the process and they'll go along with it. For others, they'll see it, depending on how you write it as well, they'll see it as a challenge of, why are you questioning me? That's what I document, that's what I get, that's what I've always gotten. And little do they know that things change and everybody's knowledge base is different. Some medical coders are more detailed than others. So that's what happens in that kind of situation. So if you are not a good writer, or if you don't know how to communicate very well with your words, like written words, this is an issue, because especially if you have to do communicating with providers that way, your delivery and your communication need to be on point, all right? And it's the same thing if you have questions, which you will, once you get in the real world. And if you start off at home right away, remote medical coding, because that's your dream, that's what you want to do, right? So you get your way, you ignore all advice and you go ahead and you work at home. Okay, so now you have a question. Okay, now I got to reach out to my lead. Let's just say you reach out to your lead, and then that lead answers your question, and then you have another question, and you have another question. And all of a sudden you're asking questions all day long. Meanwhile, the lead still has work that they have to do. And you keep asking them questions. And then you start to say, I'm sorry, I have questions, I'm sorry. When you shouldn't even be apologizing. Questions is a part of the process. But that's why I tell you all, when you're working remotely, this is something that you are going to come up against. And if you have no experience, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, is that you have all these questions and no one to ask them to. It is very important for brand new medical coders to work where they have access to other medical coders. It does not have to be forever, but it does have to be enough to get you started, to get you comfortable with the electronic medical record, to get comfortable with all the steps that you have to do and all the other things, right? And not only that, it gives you time to be able to meet the providers that you're going to be working with, or whose documentation you're going to be coding from, all right? Now, it's different at every place. Sometimes it's just a contract, and then you get hired at home to work at home, and there's no communicating with the doctor at all. You're just coding basically what is there, and that's not a good way to start off, I think, in my opinion, for brand new medical coders, because you miss out on that development when you're a brand new medical coder. It's a very sensitive time when you get your first job, right? Because being around the right people and being around the right mentors is going to go a long way into helping you. But when you're by yourself and you're at home, it's going to get lonely and it's going to get difficult. Working at home does not mean that you can work whatever hours you want to. I get that question a lot. People will ask me, well, I want to work at home so I can set my own hours and do whatever I want. It's not that way, guys. If you want that, then you make your own business. Do your own business. Do something else. Don't do this. Because when it comes to this, working remotely, oftentimes you're going to have to be on a set schedule, okay? So it'll be 7 to 3:30 or whatever the case may be. and if that's the case, then you have to be at your desk during that time. You cannot be around chasing your kids or throwing a load of laundry in or running out real quick and doing an errand and then coming right back. And then, I asked my boss and my boss said it was okay. And you may be able to get away with that maybe once or twice. But if you keep doing that, then it just seems like you're taking advantage of the situation, right? And so when they hire you to work at home, you have to be there at your desk. Some companies will have you keep the camera on. Others, they don't care. But they will be watching your clicks and you moving the mouse. And you say, well, Blue, I can get one of those mouse mover things. Okay, you can get a mouse mover thing, sure. But if you're running around everywhere you're not supposed to be and you're using the little mouse mover thing, what happens if they try to call you on like Messenger? Or what happens when they run the report that says how long you spent in a record? Because we work with electronic medical records, folks, and there's a time stamp for every single move that you make. So if it's showing that you're sitting in a record for an hour, and yeah, your light is still on, it's still green like you're available, and no one has called you, but it's not showing any coding activity going on, then they can say, okay, well, what happened here? And there's only so many times that you can say, well, this was a difficult one, and truly do mean it, right? So that's just something that, if you were thinking that that's the case, or you heard it from somebody who said that, yeah, that's what they do. They leave their desk and they run out real quick and take care of an errand real quick and they come right back and everything's hunky-dory. That's them. That's not you. That does not have to be you, all right? And you want to be able to do a good job at your job. You want to be able to, move on if you need to, go to another company or something like that. But you want to be able to have the reference too, right? So do what you need to do when you're assigned to do it, right? During that time. Don't sit here and try to work late hours to try to make up for what you did. Because again, if you're working off the clock, well, it's just me, I'm working remotely and I can work off the clock to make up for what I didn't do. That's working off the clock, and you can't do that. You can't do that either, because you can get in trouble for that too. Okay, so that's something that you if you're thinking that you can kind of like finagle your way into doing that, you're setting yourself up to fail. Okay, so the other thing that I want to talk about when you're at home and you're working at home is that you have to be in a secure space in your house. You cannot just be, and your computer monitor should be backed up against a wall. Because if it's backed out, if it's like facing like the living room area or like a bedroom area, like where anybody can open the door and look and see your screen, you've just committed a HIPAA violation, because no one should be able to see these records but you. And it's important to be able to maintain privacy of these records, regardless of if you're at your home accessing these records or if you are at the facility accessing the records. Everything has to be protected at all times. It doesn't matter. And if you say, well, Blue, my kid is 16 years old and it doesn't matter to them, they're 16, but you don't know if they're looking at the thing and all of a sudden, they see somebody that they know, right? Because you're coding for a local place and they see somebody you know, and maybe they read something and all of a sudden they know, and then they're telling everybody. Well, guess what? Again, it's even bigger trouble then. So that's the thing that you always want to kind of keep in mind when you're working at home remotely. Make sure that you set your computer monitor to face a wall, all right? No one should be in your workspace. You have no reason to have a printer for your computer. Oftentimes, companies will send the equipment needed, like a computer and the monitors and stuff, to the individual working at home, because they would rather have it on their equipment than on, an unsecured equipment. Sometimes they have like a secure portal that you can go into, but for a lot of companies, they will provide a computer. So you won't have a need for a printer. So don't even try to think of all those things. They usually will give you the equipment. But if you find yourself working at home, know that your productivity standards may be a little higher, okay? Higher than what you would normally if you were in a clinic and in a physical location. So if you are having a higher productivity rate, that means you really have to be on it. And you have to know how to do your own research. You have to know how to problem solve on your own. Because a lot of times, again, if you're still going to have like communication like over Messenger and things like that, it's got to be very clear and to the point. And other people may not always be available to help you. All right. So that's the thing. It's independent people that do really well working at home. But if you are somebody who has to have somebody constantly on you to get you to do your tasks and get you to do your work, then this is going to be very difficult for you if you're doing it at home. Okay. And the other thing about coding remotely is, for those people that think, oh, well, I want to do remote medical coding so that I can travel. I want to be able to get into a RV and be able to travel everywhere. If that's you, again, no, this is not for that. People who think that are wrong, because you can't just connect to Wi-Fi willy-nilly trying to get on to the system in order for you to code. These computer people that work for these companies, they are very well aware of what IP address they're linking to and everything like that. So they know there's a location every single time you log in, and it tells them where you are. And so if you are the type of person that thinks you're going to be slick and say, oh, well, I'm working at home, but I want to go on vacation, and they went to Mexico and they just connected to the Wi-Fi for the hotel, well, guess what? They got a call that same day from the IT folks saying, where are you? Because you are out of the country and you have our equipment. So that job did not last for that person very long either, because you can't do that. Again, you're taking private health information that is protected. There's laws that protect this private health information, and you're exposing it willy-nilly to everybody. No. So don't even think that that's something that you can do if you want to work remotely. Be responsible with it. And for some people, they say, well, Blue, I live really far out in the rural area. That's why I would really prefer to do that. And that's okay, but just make sure that you understand that it's going to be a little bit tougher, okay? Because you don't have that camaraderie around you of other medical coders and your providers. And if you are the type of person that has to be the one to do these queries with these providers, if it's at all possible, at least make one meeting with them so that they can see your face and they know who you are. And then if you're working at home, you're working at home. They may not even have the space for you anyway at the facility. But at least if you can show some effort to say, this is me, this is who I am. I may be sending you education. I may be sending you a query or two. But I want you to know I'm here. I'm your coder. This is what I look like. Because so many providers say, well, we don't know who our coders are because they're remote and we've never seen them before. They're just a faceless person on email. And to me, that's unfortunate. And I don't think that it's wrong to ask if you can meet the providers and go there in person at least one time, especially if the hospital's in the local area. And like I said, sometimes these remote jobs are contract jobs. So they're basically any coder anywhere in the US is the one that's coding it, and maybe the hospital is in New York or something, and that makes more sense that you can't do that, obviously. But again, if it is in a local area, drop by there and let them know, hey, I'm the coder, and show that initiative, so that way the communication can start opening. Just because you work remotely doesn't mean that you can't be hands-on with your providers. You know, when it was the pandemic and we all got sent home to work at home, I had worked at home previously before for a level 1 trauma hospital, and it was pretty good. But I will say that working at home at a level 1 trauma hospital, I already had my social circle already. So I still had social interactions with people. When you do this and you're remote all the time, you get no communication with anybody. It's horrible. When we were in the pandemic and it was like everybody was at home and nobody was at the facility but only the providers, and it was misery. It was a misery for me. Okay, like I said, I worked for the level 1 trauma hospital. That was a pleasant experience, but working remotely for this time during the pandemic, no, that was misery, because I was away from my providers, and anytime I sent them education or whatever, I was like, okay, I need to make it where they're still communicating with me. I don't want them ignoring me. I said, I need a response from everybody on this email, that you got this email, and they they responded. But it was very difficult for them. And then I started getting emails like, where are you, Blue? You need to come back. You need to come back. And it did eventually go back. And I'm back at the facility full time. My facility does allow for remote work, but I'm one of the very few. There's maybe but three or four of us that are at the facility that are coders full time. The supervisors are there full time at the facility now as well. But I'm about one of 4 coders that is at the facility all the time. I see the importance of being at the facility and being with them. When I have to do any kind of education, I do see the difference between sending an email and going to them in person. I did have a situation where I emailed a provider a query, and he emailed back, and he was very upset. And you know, it's understandable to be upset, but I was like, oh, okay, let me go over there and fix this. So I marched right over there and I said, okay, let's talk about this, you know, and I explained what was going on with this query. And then he was like, oh, okay, well, I'll fix it, you know. And then he's like, I don't mind fixing it, Blue. Oh, okay. So there's a big difference, right? Big difference in the communication, you know. He goes, well, I'm glad you came back. He goes, I like when you come back here and talk to us. I said, okay, you know, if that's all it takes, I'll go and talk to you. I have no problems talking to providers. But sometimes that's what they need. And I've heard from a provider that has left my facility before that said, hey, Blue, I know you have your channel, and if you ever talk to them about like being a remote coder, you tell them that they need to speak to us. She goes, I hate being on these hit lists for not doing something that I was supposed to do, but I didn't know I was supposed to do because they didn't tell me. And they go, and it was the coders that were supposed to do it. And I said, okay, that's a good thing. And then she's like, it's so different when the coders are not as engaged. And I was like, yeah, it is, you know. So just because you're remote doesn't mean you have to disengage. It's the reason, all the more reason to really dig in and to really try very hard to keep that communication open and going. And like I said, even if you are working remotely for a local hospital, go in there every once in a while and show your face, or talk to your supervisor and see, hey, is it possible we can get on their education calendar and do some training so that way they can see us and that way they know that we're available to help them. You know, it makes the whole process of coding much easier when you have good communication with providers. When you have no communication with providers, or bad communication with providers, meaning that they don't believe in you, they don't believe in what you're doing there, they don't know you, and so you're just bottom of the barrel on their list, and then they don't want to have to deal with you. And when you can spend the time to work with that particular provider that may be struggling a little bit to kind of understand what we're doing there, you know, it does help. You know, sometimes it's not the provider's fault that they're like that either. because sometimes they've been exposed to really bad coders who go after them with a red pen and who tell them, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, and never really explaining why and making them feel bad. So there's a lot of that too. You know, guys, you got to think about that. When it comes to us as medical coders and the fact that we know what we're doing, sometimes, sometimes no, it depends. Because some coders will take that power that they get and the fact that they can go to a provider and say that, hey, you did this wrong, and it'll go to their head, and they don't know how to educate and how to help that provider not continue to make the same mistakes, right? So that's the thing, that you have to really pick and choose what kind of coder are you going to be. And even though you're working remotely, doesn't mean that you have to be totally hands off, all right? And that's something that you got to know, all right? But it's not easy working at home, guys. And especially when you have no experience. You know, I'm not gonna say either way, you know, but because I've already been very clear on my channel several times about why I think medical coders that are brand new should not work at home right away. And it's not that just because you work at home, well, Blue, I'm working at home and I'm brand new, I don't have experience. But what are you missing out on? What are some of the things that you could be getting if you were around other coders? You know, I'm just saying. And if it works out for you that you're at home and that's the first job that you got and you like it, by all means, you do what is good for you. But I'm just saying, for those people that are looking at medical coding and because they want to immediately do remote and they think that it's easy and that they can just go out willy-nilly anytime they want to and do all those things, everything is monitored even more because you're at home. Okay, so that's just what I'm gonna say. And like I said, I hope that I don't want to hear any comments about traveling, guys, because I'm not gonna have this discussion anymore when it comes to, oh, well, I get to no, because it's not right that protected health information is out there like that, being just, you know, being vulnerable with that information. No, that's not right. Like I said, pick another field, because that's not for this. Think about it if it was your information, your private health information, you going to the doctor and having a very sensitive or private moment with that doctor, and then all of a sudden everybody has access to your medical record and can see that. Think about how you would feel, right? The same thing if you go to therapy. Would you want all that information to be out there for everybody to see willy-nilly because somebody wants to be out there traveling around and just hooking up to Wi-Fi here and there? It doesn't matter, guys. It does not matter. I'm just saying. You want to make sure that you protect that information at all times. You don't want to be responsible for a HIPAA breach. I'm just saying. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.